This critique examines a video investigation into Minnesota's welfare fraud, specifically focusing on these ghost NEMT companies and childcare centers allegedly funneling billions. Okay, let's just jump right in.
All right.
The material you have here it's incredibly powerful. The facts alone are just so compelling.
They really are.
But to really maximize the impact of this, to make it resilient against the backlash that's, definitely coming, the overall tone has to rely purely on those facts, not on sensationalism.
I see that. That's a critical point. But I guess my question is, I can see why they went for that confrontational style, right? It gets clicks, it creates drama. If you edit all that out, do you lose the color of the story?
That's a fair point, but it's about narrative priority. The weakness, as we see it, is that the video keeps shifting focus away from the devastating financial evidence.
And the government failure?
And the government failure, exactly. It gets pulled into these really charged personal arguments, Think about that scene with Safari Transportation.
Oh, yeah, you're right. When they're confronted, the subjects immediately go to defenses like Islamophobia or you're just making propaganda.
And the confrontational style almost validates that deflection.
It does. It pulls everyone's attention away from the real question, the objective ones, like, why is this daycare licensed for 118 kids, but there are 0 footprints in the snow?
Or just, where is the fleet of vehicles registered to this address? Simple, verifiable things.
Yeah.
So the suggestion here is really to recalibrate the style. Maintain a strictly objective, almost clinical, journalistic voice in those field segments. You have to let the reality, the boarded-up windows at Advanced Mobility, the ghost address at a liquor store, let that be the emotional punch.
Not the fight.
Not the personal fight between the reporter and the person he's confronting.
Okay, so let's make that actionable. That Safari Transportation confrontation, the guy calls the interviewer a son of a bitch. High drama, for sure.
Huge drama, but it's a total distraction.
So instead of engaging with that, the host should just pivot.
Immediately.
Right back to the evidence.
Immediately. And not by shouting back, but by calmly narrating the facts over the scene. Something like, the state website lists 607 Cedar Avenue as Safari Transportation, but the premises is demonstrably a money-wiring business.
The subject was unable to provide the location of the business and instead shifted to personal attacks. Our central finding remains. A business that billed the state for millions is not at its registered address.
That is so much more devastating to their credibility than a shouting match. It just leaves them hanging.
It forces the audience to focus on the crime. And building on that, you have to cut the generalized commentary. The little bits about violence or whatever in a community.
Right, replace it with tight, factual summaries.
Exactly.
The focus, the emotional weight needs to land squarely on the real victims here.
The taxpayers.
The taxpayers footing the bill and the people who actually need these programs and are getting nothing because the funds were stolen. That's the story.
So the documented facts are the weapon. Don't blunt them. Don't blunt them. And then emphasis on the paper trail, on the system itself, that leads us right to the next point.
Okay.
Structuring the NEMT mechanism and connecting all these ghost companies.
Right.
The material makes this really strong case that NEMT, the transportation piece, is the heart of the beast.
The hub of the wheel. Yeah, I thought that was a brilliant concept.
It is essential, but I wonder if the piece fully capitalizes on that idea during the field segments,
You mean it states the idea but doesn't weave it through everything?
Exactly. That core analytical point needs to be woven into every single confrontation, every site visit, to keep reinforcing the fraud model for the viewer.
Okay, so just to recap the mechanism, the argument is that these companies get paid, $100 per round trip?
About that, for an estimated 10 trips a day per 20 vehicles. And the key is, it's all based on self-reported electronic forms.
Zero verification.
Zero. It is an honor system that is paying out millions and millions of dollars.
But then, like you said, when the video goes out into the field, the focus is just on, hey, this company isn't here. It doesn't always connect it back to that specific financial mechanism being exploited.
And that little separation, it reduces the clarity for the viewer. They see a ghost address, but they might not immediately connect it to the staggering revenue figures. That $1.3 million a year per company.
You have to keep reminding them of the stakes. So the suggestion is that every failed site visit has to explicitly connect the physical absence of the business
back to that paper trail vulnerability.
The fact that just existing on paper lets them file those electronic reports and get paid instantly.
Think about those numbers for a second. 1.3 million in annual revenue for one company just from self-reported data. That's just typing numbers into a form from the back of a money wiring service.
Or a liquor store, it just grounds the whole thing in this shocking reality.
So, a concrete example. For a Safari Transportation at 607 Cedar Ave, you show the money wiring business, and then the voiceover immediately gives the financial implication.
Something like,
A company with no physical presence listed at this address since 2015 is potentially billing the state for 20 vehicles making 10 trips a day. That represents an estimated $1.3 million in annual revenue based purely on an electronic form.
yes, that's so effective. You see the ghost company, you hear the massive dollar figure tied to it, it bridges the gap perfectly.
In that other visual, the Dreamline vans locked in the snow for, 8 months?
Oh yeah, with the ice built up, no tire tracks.
The commentary there has to bridge that directly to the state's failure. These 11 vans, demonstrably stationary for months, represent thousands of fabricated trips paid for electronically because the state never once physically checked.
And with advanced mobility, the one that's been registered since 1999,
26 years.
that longevity has to be the point. It's not just fraud today. It's a 2-decade-long systemic collapse of oversight. That just multiplies the weight of it all exponentially.
And that idea of systemic collapse, that leads us perfectly into the final section, maximizing the scale with that cash funnel data.
Okay.
This is the big one, the TSA whistleblower testimony. Millions in cash funneled through MSP Airport to Dubai, then wired to Somalia. This is the most damning piece of the whole puzzle.
Reading that testimony, the part about a $6 million suitcase, that just stopped me cold. That isn't petty theft.
No.
That's an industrial-scale money laundering operation being funded by the state of Minnesota.
It's the ultimate so what moment for the entire investigation, and the weakness is just that this explosive information is placed so late in the cut, it almost feels like a footnote.
An addendum, yeah. When you're talking $5 to $6 million moved twice a week for 6 years, that can't be an afterthought. It's the consequence of the entire fraud model.
So, is there a risk that putting it so late makes it feel disconnected from the day-to-day fraud at the daycare centers?
I think so. The suggestion is to introduce the concept of this exit mechanism much earlier and treat the TSA whistleblower as the definitive expert who was confirming the final stage of the pipe.
You'd need to dedicate a focused, really dramatic segment just to this testimony.
Absolutely. This agent, he worked narcotics for 24 years. He saw emails from dispatch saying, people were claiming huge amounts of cash, $750,000 up to $6 million in a suitcase.
Twice a week
For 6 years. And the kicker is that dispatch knew, higher-ups knew, and his words, nothing was ever done.
So that requires a pretty big structural shift.
You'd use the whistleblower data to create a whole new narrative structure.
A new shape for the story.
You start with the ghost NEM companies generating the claims,
which we just talked about. Transition to the ghost daycares that are getting the money, and then you conclude with the TSA agent verifying exactly where all that laundered cash ended up.
By doing that, you explicitly link the billing vulnerability directly to the cash move. You're showing how the easy billing created the liquid cash needed to move millions out of the airport twice a week. It shows the whole system working perfectly.
For the criminals.
And there's another crucial detail in there. These massive sums of cash were declared at customs.
Right, because they were over the $10,000 limit. So TSA, HSI, customs, they all knew.
And yet, the money was still allowed to leave.
And that fact that this wasn't a narcotics crime, so it didn't trigger their protocols, that shows this profound regulatory gap that just facilitated the whole thing.
You're framing the systemic failure, not just a few bad actors.
Exactly. It makes the case against government complacency just unassailable.
And it makes the scale of the fraud totally concrete. It's not a number on a page. It's literal suitcases of cash leaving the state twice a week for years, all traceable back to that unchecked empty paper trail.
Yeah.
So that really brings us to the close here. We covered, 3 big interconnected opportunities to strengthen this? First, refining the tone to just let the verifiable facts speak for themselves. Second, really integrating that NEMT financial mechanism into the field visits to make the model clear.
Right, connecting the dots.
And finally, just dramatically reframing that explosive TSA whistleblower data as the definitive proof of systemic failure.
The facts you have are they're so robust and deeply concerning,
By focusing on the clarity and gravity of that evidence, by shifting the audience from personal conflict to just the pure, overwhelming proof, the whole piece becomes much harder for critics or, implicated politicians to dismiss.
Make them focus on the money and the lack of accountability.
That's the goal.
We really look forward to seeing the refined material. Please resubmit your work soon for our next critique.